Hello and welcome to Construct from Below. As always, I'm your host, Khan, and today I have three co-hosts, Austin,
Hello there.
Ben,
Howdy.
and a new one, Rocky.
Howdy.
Real quick before we jump into our topic, since this is your first time on here, Rocky, what set did you start playing Magic in, and what formats do you or have you played?
Technically, I started playing in M13 when Duels of the Planeswalkers came out, but I wouldn't really consider that my real start. I would say I really got into Magic during Amonkhet, and I primarily play Limited. I've dabbled in Standard, but Limited's my favorite by far. When I go back home and I have people to play with, I'll play Commander as well.
All right, perfect. Now we're going to jump into our main topic, only on one topic today, and that's we have decided to compile our staples, what we think are cards in all colors and categories that are generically good. So, what does that mean? Let's start by defining this here. I think that a good example is, like, if a card is powerful, it doesn't mean it's going to be on this list. It has to be a card that can just work in any deck that has these colors and provide a significant amount of value. So a card like Natural Order, which lets you sack a green creature to put a green creature from your deck into play for 4 mana, is a very powerful card. You can cheat in a lot of things. But if you're not a green creature deck, let's say you're Civic Spellslinger, you're probably not going to want to play it. But something like Sylvan Library, any deck wants card advantage. So that is on our staples list, whereas Natural Order is not. As just like a starting example.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. For me, it's just anytime during construction, right when I'm starting the deck, I say, all right, I need this card in here just by virtue of being in that color, or at the very least heavily consider putting that card in there.
Personally, I think that a staple is a card that is incorrect not to. Like, your deck is just objective, you're not playing it.
I guess to me, please go ahead.
I was gonna ask Ben here. In that same vein, though, do you think that there's any cards on this list that you would purposely not put in a deck? Because I remember, when I was building certain Reanimator strategies that had a lot of looting, I did not put Necropotence in there because I didn't want to have to pitch all my fatties and exile them. Even though Necropotence is pretty good, I don't know if that I would agree with what you said quite there, because sometimes you might really not want it.
It's true. So there's definitely downsides to certain cards like Necropotence, but are you ever going to play a deck that doesn't have Soul Ring, right? Like, it's wrong not to play that.
I personally would say there is a good example of a deck that doesn't really play Soul Ring, and that would be either Elf Ball decks or the mono green Omnath, who gains power and toughness equal to the amount of green mana you have floating.
Yeah, that's true. I cut Soul Ring from my Elf Ball deck because I literally would cast it and have nothing to use it on just because I needed so much green specifically. I think that there's nothing that's going to be on this list that is like an absolute must play just because, maybe you're in blue, Cycrypt is good, but Primal Surge is a card. And if you're playing a Primal Surge deck, you just can't play Cycrypt at the same time.
Yeah, I think there's always a case for every single one of these cards to not play. There's always some sort of edge case.
Partly what makes me think of a staple is when you're building a deck and you are limited on colors, what cards must you include? So it's not necessarily, I am in a 5-color deck, therefore I have pretty much unlimited choice and I'll pick the best bits. As I tend to play a lot of 4 and 5-color decks, that's typically what I do. But in settings where I have a lot less choice in these 1 or 2-color decks, it is more likely I'll be choosing some of these cards. For example, in my 5-color deck, I don't run cards like Smothering Tithe. It's an amazing card. It's extremely powerful, but it doesn't necessarily fit in that deck.
I think we have a pretty reasonable, general definition for it. It's a card that 99% of the time, if it's not in your deck and you're in those colors, it's probably a mistake. And there will be a tapped out list, show notes or description that you can click on and follow along. Why don't we start jumping into the first color and looking at what some of the things we have written here and talk about anything we think should be removed, should be added. So starting off with white, we have Swords to Plowshares, Path to Exile, Smothering Tithe, Sevinne's Reclamation, Grand Abolisher, Drannith Magistrate, Generous Gift, Wrath of God. Anything that is particularly you guys think should be removed or added?
As it stands, I'm on the edge when it comes to Path to Exile and Sevinne's Reclamation. Because Path to Exile, giving your opponent a land isn't necessarily the worst case scenario, especially in a format that has such a wide range of mana costs. But I do think Swords to Plowshares is strictly better in most cases, unless you are, for example, a more aggressive deck that cares inherently about the life total of your opponents. Sevinne's Reclamation is a powerful card, especially in the fact that it gives a similar effect to that of Sun Titan, and that it can return low-cost permanents. So if you have things like fetch lands, and you tend to have them in your graveyard a decent amount, you can use Sevinne's Reclamation as ramp in cases where you don't have access to it, where you aren't necessarily running green. But I'm not sure if it is. I'm not sure if it is. What am I saying?
A staple?
Thank you. I'm not sure if it is necessarily a staple in that it doesn't seem to go for a majority of white decks to me.
Well, I threw Sevinne's on here, and I want to argue for that. Sevinne's Reclamation helps one of the things that white struggles with the most, and that is ramp. You know, if you're in a mono white deck, you're able to play not even just like fetch lands, but also just cards like Evolving Wilds or Fabled Passage. This not only can protect your mana rocks and protect your ramp, but also can accelerate your mana further by putting those fetches in play. And being able to ramp in mono white is pretty tough. Now, interesting that you mentioned Sun Titan there. Do we think that Sun Titan should be on this list? I wouldn't consider Sun Titan ramp because it's already like a 6-drop at that point. So going from 6 to 7 mana is not particularly amazing.
I would actually argue that I think Sun Titan is more generally good than Summation because it gives you that body and the recurring effect.
That's true, but I don't know. I feel like Savine, because it's 3 men on the front half and 5 on the back. So on 3 you play it, you go to 4. Next turn you flash it back, you go from 5 to 7, and then you'll untap with 8 mana on turn 5. Like that's a really powerful curve, and that will let you keep up with most in mono.
Yeah, that's true.
What do you think, Rocky? Should we add Sun Titan?
I think Sevinne's Reclamation is definitely a better like general purpose card, but I like Sun Titan a lot. I think Sun Titan is good, even though Sevinne's Reclamation is probably more general purpose in mono white. I think just having the 6/6 body is really good because I suppose I wouldn't look at that effect and use it for ramp, but the case you mentioned is very powerful. But I don't know, 6/6 Vigilance that can bring things back, I think is good in just about every like mono white deck.
I mean, this isn't like
know.
an either or. We can have both on the list or neither on the list.
Yeah,
not limited to any number.
Yeah, and that was something I was actually thinking about when we were talking about Swords and Path to Exile. Like Austin was saying that Path is generally worse than like Swords, and I agree. But I think they're both so good, you probably just jam in both of them in most cases. And I think it might be a similar case with Sun Titan and Sevinne's Reclamation. Even if one's like worse than the other, they're both still pretty good. Just like have.
So do we want to remove Sevinne's Reclamation, or do we think that it's fine to stay on there?
I'll retract my statement and say that I think it does make the cut, especially given the fact that we are being... You know what? Just cut this whole thing. I don't know what I'm saying.
Okay.
Goof on him. Leave it in.
All right, I want to make an argument for something I think should not be on this. And Austin, I know you put this here. I'm going to hit you with, I don't think Generous Gift goes on this. Now, I know it says destroy target permanent, which is cool, and it gives your opponent a 3/3. But I feel like getting rid of a permanent on the battlefield is not particularly difficult for white. Like, I feel like if you build a white deck and you just have removal in it of some sort, you're probably going to be able to hit most types of permanents. Unlike Beast Within for green, where it's really hard to kill, just like outright kill creatures or planeswalkers.
That's a really good point, Con.
In defense of Generous Gift, I would say that having the wide range of targets, because destroy target permanent is such a powerful line of text, I would say it fits a better role than most of the other pieces of removal. Like, yes, white does have the ability to pretty much destroy and exile almost anything, but my only kind of complaint is that I personally like to have removal spells that have as many options as possible, because then I can draw any piece of my removal and always have an answer.
I can see that. I mean, I'm not going to argue that destroy target permanent is not a good line of text to have. I mean, it is. All right. No, that's fine. We'll leave Generous Gift. If there's nothing else on the white that we don't want to take off, there was something that I was interested in adding, and that's the new Mangara. Have y'all seen that?
That is a very powerful card, and it does give a decent amount of card draw on white, which is something that color is significantly lacking otherwise.
Yeah, let me give it a read because it's such a new card. 3 and a white, 2/4 human cleric, legendary creature, Mangara the Diplomat. Lifelink. When an opponent attacks with creatures. If 2 or more of those creatures are attacking you and or Planeswalker control, draw a card. Whenever an opponent casts their second spell each turn, draw a card. I mean, I think this is something that can just very incidentally draw you a lot of cards.
Yeah, I think this
Oh,
card
yeah.
is really powerful, and it gives us white a lot of card lack.
Yeah, honestly, I'd probably consider this a staple. I mean, I don't think it'll stop anyone from hitting you, but just, I mean, the threat and plus the card draw when they do inevitably, like, swing at you. Plus, I mean, the second clause, whenever an opponent casts their second spell each turn. I mean, that's going to happen so often. And that's something I'd probably just jam into every white deck.
Okay, then I think our mono white list is pretty good here. Shall we move on to the next color?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, so next we have red. Things we have on the red list right now: Gamble, Dockside Extortionist, Blasphemous Act, Chaos Warp, Vandal Blast, Faithless Looting, and then a questionable Enchanter's Bane. Anything that should be added or removed?
I think Enchanter's Bane is kind of bad.
Let's give Enchanter's Bane a read just because a lot of people might not know what that card does. So it's red and 1 for an enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, target enchantment deals damage equal to its converted mana cost to its controller, unless that player's sacrifice. I mean, it's a red enchantment with the downside that if there's no enchantment to play other than it, it's going to deal 2 damage to you every turn until you sacrifice it. So, like,
I mean, I feel like in those cases, you probably just take the damage. Like, if I'm getting targeted with that card and it's enchantment holding my deck together, I mean, I'll take the damage. I don't know. If it's good enough to get removed, it's probably good enough to, like, stay.
In defense of Enchanter's Bane, if you are not in white or green, you most likely do not have any way to deal with enchantments. Unless you're in blue, then you can bounce them, I guess. But otherwise, any way to deal with enchantments is in the colorless sector, which we'll get to later. But I feel Enchanter's Bane kind of fills a certain role that is not filled with red. And in red especially, where you have a lot of primarily damage spells for your removal and player interaction, I feel Enchanter's Bane can make a significant impact, especially when you're adding, 3 or 4 damage to a person every turn.
I mean, you're right that like a lot of like powerful enchantments are kind of higher mana cost. Even like Doubling Season's 5 mana, and that will tack on. If they're taking 5 every turn, they're going to eventually have to sacrifice it. It's a serious clock. It's just also, as Rocky said, though, if the card is that threatening, maybe I'll take the damage to keep it. Because with something like Doubling Season, yeah, maybe I'll take 5 every turn, but I also might win the game in 2, just because that card being on the battlefield can set things, can snowball so hard.
Of course. And that's why I kind of have a little asterisk of needs additional support to work. Like, it is a decently powerful card in that it can give you interaction that you wouldn't typically have, but it needs some sort of additional thing to lower people's life totals to make the usually 3 or 4 damage actually impactful.
Yeah, I'm gonna add a maybe board to the tapped out, and I think we'll put this on the maybe board.
I feel that's a more appropriate. Sorry.
Oh, I was also gonna say I don't think either of us have played the card yet. It's like hard for us to judge.
Yeah, I keep trying to put it in a deck, but I don't know if I don't know. It's just a very odd card, and having decks that, like in Rakdos, that just don't have enough interaction with enchantments, it kind of feels like I should play it, but I'm just not sure yet. I need more experience playing with the card. I think the maybe board is the perfect place.
Do we have anything that we feel should be added or removed from our current red list?
I'm not sure about Faithless Looting. I'm not sure if it should be a staple necessarily.
Even in the context of mono red.
Yeah, mono red, I think just drawing cards is like so important because you gas out so fast.
When you have cards like Wild Guess,
Cathartic Reunion, and Develop Possibilities, I assume?
as well as the last one, Tormenting Voice. So I was
Tormenting Voice, yeah.
When you have cards like Wild Guess, Tormenting Voice, Cathartic Reunion, or Thrill of Possibilities, I think those cards are a little more powerful than Faithless Looting in that you are trading less cards, because when you cast Faithless Looting, you're effectively gaining 2 cards and losing 2. Sure, you see the 2 cards before you lose the other 2, but with the other spells, you discard first. You can discard a card already know you don't need and dig deeper. Especially with Cathartic Reunion, which digs 3 cards deep, even though you do have to discard 2 cards.
Well, so here's the thing, though, is Tormenting Voice and Wild Guess. Pitch 1, draw 1, right?
Discard 1, draw 2.
Oh,
They
Ducks,
break even.
You're right. They break even, but so does Faithless Looting, because in the yard it's a flashback spell. Otherwise, you're right. Faithless Looting is -1 card advantage, but not really because that's flashback.
Yeah, I think it's the main advantage over Faithless Looting.
There's another card that recently got printed by the name of. Hold on, I need to look it up again. I just forgot.
Faithful Looting.
It's like Chandra's something. It lets you discard Chandra's Regulator. Chandra's Regulator is red and 1 for a legendary artifact. It makes it so whenever you activate a loyalty ability of a Chandra Planeswalker, you can pay a mana and copy it. But that's not really the part that I find in its draw. The artifact has a second ability where you can pay 1 mana and tap it and discard either a mountain or a red card to draw a card. And it's kind of a reusable effect in red that can produce a decent amount of card draw over time. It's not necessarily card draw inherently, but it's more of a filtering aspect.
And getting rid of mountains in mono red seems pretty powerful. It's generally pretty low curve.
This is interesting because it's a card advantage, not advantage, card filtering engine in mono red, which is very unique. It's pretty new too. M20. I'm down to we can add this to the list.
Yeah, honestly, I agree.
Yeah, I didn't think about it when I first came up with my ideas for the list, but I think it can find its own spot.
Do you think we should just turn like the looting and Catharic Reunion stuff into like their own category and just say you should have some cards like that?
We can put them into like one category: Faithless Looting / Reunion, the Wheel of Possibilities.
I do think those are the best three.
Yeah, I would agree. Because I feel like, I mean, in mono red, you want at least always one of them, if not 2 or 3.
All right, then if we're done with red, we'll move on to blue.
Before we move on to blue, I want to talk a little bit about Bolt. How do you guys feel about that?
I've never put Bolt in any of my EDH decks. I don't know. It's like my problem is it will, I feel like, usually kill like 50% of the commanders at the table and like a decent amount of creatures. But the amount of 4 toughness creatures you see in EDH is like way higher. I don't know. What do you two think? Have you played Bolt in anything? I think you have, right, Ben?
No, I don't play it. I don't think we do.
I much prefer cards like Anger of the Gods that deal 3 damage to each creature. Like, it is 3 times the amount of mana, but it tends to hit more of a wide variety. And it exiles the creature that kills. So I think that's a little bit better, even if it is more mana.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I just want to get your guys' opinion on it.
Before we move on to blue, I would like to ask you guys about the card Gamble. Like, it is a very powerful card, especially in mono red, where you're able to tutor up any card, but you have to pitch a card at random. Is it a staple, or is it more of a card that is needed in cases where you can run Gamble, where you don't necessarily care about pitching a card at random?
I don't know. I think if you're restricted in your colors and have access to Monarch too, even sometimes, it's 1 mana. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah, it is a really good card. The only problem I would have with it is if I'm playing a deck where I'm expecting to have like an empty hand most of the time, or only 1 or 2 cards. If I'm playing like a slinger deck and like I'm not drawing any cards because it's kind of hard in red, then I probably wouldn't want Gamble just because there's a very good chance I'll end up discarding the card that I get. But if I play it on turn 1, then like I don't know, it probably won't happen anyway. So I'm kind of 50-50 on it.
I mean, like, I agree Gamble is a really bad top deck. Like, you have nothing in hand. If you're not playing any type of graveyard strategy, like Austin mentioned, it can be like really weak at sometimes. I don't know. I'm hesitant to put it on the staple list too, just because if I don't want things in the graveyard in my red deck, it's really only good if I have a full grip. And especially if I'm mono red, it can be rough to have a full grip.
Yeah,
I'd be tempted to say, like, if I'm playing in any 2-color combo other than, like, Boros, I would probably want Gamble, though. Maybe not Rakdos.
I think it just depends on how many graveyard things you have. If you're any type of graveyard synergistic deck, Life from the Loam, Reanimator, Targets, etc., it's really good even as a top deck, just because you could put your Vengeful Pharaoh or whatever in the bin.
Yeah, I think it is a really good card, but probably not a staple.
All right, let's give Gamble the axe then. So then, shall we move on to blue?
Let's do it.
All right, so under blue, we have Rhystic Study, Mystic Remora, Cyclonic Rift. Here I just put UU counterspell, so like mana drain if you can afford it. Otherwise, just like regular counterspell. Whatever the best 2-mana counter magic you could find. Snapcaster Mage. And then we have Gitaxian Probe and Reality Shift / Curse of the Swine.
So I've never seen Mystic Remora in play. What's generally the context you would cast that under?
Turn 1, you draw 3 cards, and then you do not pay the cost.
Or anytime you can. That card is just pretty much broken.
More often than not, I'll just pay for it, just have it around. Worst case scenario, it slows down my opponents.
Yeah, I definitely have just purposely had to sandbag for like 2 turns to wait for you to get rid of the Remora, because otherwise I know you're going to draw like 6 cards. Like, it's just, the 4 mana is so hard to pay for, unlike Rhystic Study. It's just, I don't know, that card is objectively always correct to play, I think. That's a lie. I built a deck that didn't have it because it was a reweave deck with Keranos and it's cheating omniscience in play, but like other than that, you should.
Yeah, that makes sense, because already, like, Rhystic Study is pretty oppressive, so I could imagine Mystic Remora being even, like, more insane.
I think Remora is more powerful than Rhystic Study by like a decent.
I would honestly say Rhystic Study isn't that oppressive of a card. It only tacks on 1 mana, and it's only per spell cast. Because it's only 1 mana, and there are plenty of decks that play only like 1 or 2 spells a turn. Actually, that's the vast majority of decks in Commander, I'd say. It doesn't affect a lot of decks too much. It can generate like incidental card draw for you, which is very powerful, but also it itself is very powerful, and generating that card draw just inherently over time and just tacking on a small tax to each person's plays is just a very powerful effect, and I think it stays on the staples list. Not that anyone was arguing otherwise.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I definitely believe Rhystic Study is a staple. It's just, for me, I think it's kill on sight, because if it's played in the early game, the incidental card draw is just like a lot.
I mean, if it's played on turn 1 off of a Mana Crypt, like, yeah. But I feel like even by the time it hits like turn even later, it's not insane. I don't know. I feel like it's one that I can very easily, when my opponent play it, look at my curve and say, all right, in the next 3 turns, they'll probably draw 1 card off. And in that case, it's like not particularly busted.
Well, I mean, there's still the other 2 players, right?
Well, I mean, in the scenario we're assuming the other 2 players are like also going to, attempt to pay for the tax. I think, Rhystic Study is most powerful when people don't understand the power of card advantage and they just play into it without planning out their plays in a manner where they're like, all right, if I do this first, I'll pay the tax, and then this. So I'll have enough mana to pay the tax. I feel like a lot of people just kind of throw crap into it because they're like, whatever. But that's when it's most powerful. But you should never assume that your opponents are going to make bad plays.
I would agree with that statement. In less experienced play groups, I would say they underestimate the power of card draw. And with that, it makes Rhystic Study a lot more powerful.
For context, Rocky is not part of our regular play group. I know him and have played with him elsewhere, but he's not part of our regular play group. This is like our extra outside perspective kind of co-host here. I feel like in our games, Rhystic Study generates typically 3-4 cards in total over the course of the entire game, at most.
Yeah, I would say if that. I've seen cases where it just generates none, but still that makes an impact on the game because now everything costs 1 more.
Well, yeah, I guess that's the other thing. I played against it in a few games back at GP Vegas, and if it wasn't drawing cards, it was heavily dictating the pace of the game. Although I think we were all playing pretty high curve decks, incidentally. So,
I mean, again, none of us are arguing that Rhystic Study should not be on this list. It's still very powerful. Why don't we move to some of the other ones? So Cycle Rift, I feel like, is fairly obvious, right? Good Magic the Gathering card. We don't need to explain that one. Counter Magic, if you're in blue, I really hate it when I see a blue deck that just has no counter magic. Like, you need some way to interact with this deck. Unless you're doing some sort of Primal Surge, it's pretty rough to have none. Snapcaster Mage, how do we feel about that one?
I actually don't think it's a staple. I think Snapcaster Mage is only good for playing a large number, and obviously it's great in that setup, but that's not every single.
Yeah, I would agree. I wouldn't play it in my Azuri deck because I run very few instant sorceries.
I think it's really good in Azuri because it triggers Azuri and it lets you get back something.
I mean, it triggers Azuri, but like I'm saying, there's a good chance I won't get back anything from it. I mean, I do run a couple instants and sorceries, but I mean, it's mostly targeted removal or counter spells.
Awesome.
I do think that Snapcaster Mage is a powerful card, and it should go in decks that run a more saturated amount of instants and sorceries. As pretty much the most of my decks are 4 and 5 color, I don't run Snapcaster Mage in any of them. I do run a Torrential Gearhulk in my artifact deck. That's mostly because it's an artifact that has a pretty good battlefield trick. It doesn't run that many instant sorceries, and as such, I probably wouldn't run it otherwise.
All right, then we'll take it off. The next one, Gitaxian.
I would personally say that Gitaxian Probe is more of a CDH staple than the kind of commander that we play.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you there. I think it's very powerful with combo decks, but I don't know. I think it is just a better. You can just play a better card in a traditional.
You might as well pay the 1 mana and dig a little deeper, I'd say.
Well, I think that's the cool thing about Jitaxi and Probe is that you're essentially able to pay 2 life to just have 1 less card in the deck.
Sure, but I almost see that as kind of a downside. I want to be able to explore the deck and utilize all my slots. If I think Ataxian Probe is a card that I'd usually end up cutting in like the last deck creation because it cycles.
We play Jank here, and therefore we need to fill a lot of our slots with Jank.
I do agree with Austin's statement. I will say though, so I think if you're in any type of deck that wants number of instances sorcerers cast to be high, it's like the number one card to put in the deck. But my problem with cantrips in casual EDH is if you're not a combo deck, you don't need to, because like combo decks is just you're trying to get to A plus B or X, Y, and Z to win the game. So everything else in your deck is just fluff because you're just trying to spin through your deck until you hit the actual combo that wins the game. And Gitaxian Probe is the best fluff you can put in your deck because it is free, it's just nothing, which is great as far as fluff is concerned. But I don't think you need fluff in casual EDH. I think you want more cards that generate card advantage or generate value on board over time, something a little grindier. And I feel like cantrips are something that I've cut from most of my casual decks just because they don't provide enough, proper advantage. And if you want to sculpt your hand just for like lands, I would say I would also agree with what Austin said there and actually spend the mana to cast like a Serum Visions or a Brainstorm to go a little bit deeper if you're just looking to have a nicer curve.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think I've been swayed. I guess I was under the limited mindset of wanting like only a few specific cards and like the rest of your cards like being about getting to them, but it doesn't really work in EDH when like you can actually just choose good cards.
All right, then here, Austin, I believe you put Reality Shift / Curse of the Swine. I'm interested in this slash because I think these are pretty different cards.
I just mean more that blue has access to very limited interaction that isn't return to hand and then counter something on the way down. Having things like Reality Shift and Curse the Swine are just good effects to have. It's creature interaction on board, and I just think that's an important thing to have. They are quite different cards in that Reality Shift primarily hits one creature and Curse the Swine can hit a lot. That's the main draw of each of them. There's also cards like
Rapid Hybridization, Pognify.
Yes, thank you.
I think those are more staples than Curse of the Swine. Curse of the Swine is a sorcery, too.
It is. It is quite slow, but if you have a lot of mana and you're trying to generate a lot of mana, it's good for that kind of deck. Typically, I would favor Reality Shift, though.
I don't know. Do either of you play any of these cards? Do you play Curse of the Swine and Azuri so you can hit your own board to double up your Azuri counters?
I actually do play Curse of the Swine in Azuri just because, it's nice to be able to remove multiple things. Like, that is one of the few, non-creature spells I'll play in that deck. But that's pretty funny tech with, getting the counters. I didn't think about that.
What about you, Ben?
No, I don't have any decks that I've played in. My only blue deck at the moment is my Raft deck.
Do you play Reality Shift, Pognify, Rapid Hybridization, those types in there?
No, I just play Sword and Path. But I have a decent number of board clips in that deck as well with Stone. This just kind of I don't think I need the one.
Now my Varel of the Whole Clade deck, on the other hand, it can generate a lot of mana and primarily works in sorcery speed. So Curse the Swine works a lot better than Reality Shift, but I do run both.
I think Curse of the Swine is just, I wouldn't say it's a staple.
Understandable. It requires a lot of mana and sorcery speed, and that limits the kind of decks that can play it.
Yeah, I'm mono blue. I would agree with you, but I would say Reality Shift almost definitely is a staple.
Do we want to put Pognify / Rapid Hybridization in that slot?
Yeah, I think it.
Yeah, they're all basically the same card.
Excuse me, one of them makes sense.
Arg Lizard?
Pognify is strict. Sorry, go ahead.
I like Pognify, Zara. It's pretty good.
Pognify is technically strictly better because there are less ape synergies in the game, and it's only one creature type instead of two. So,
Yeah, but that makes it green. Is the Frog Lizard also green?
The lizard is also green.
Oh, never mind then. All right, shall we move on to green?
Yes.
All right. So under green, we have a lot of cards. Who would have thought? Green's a good color. Crozan Grip, Llanowar Elves / Mana Dorks in general. There's Sakura Tribuilder here, but we'll talk about that under the sort of 2-mana ramp cards. BOP. Wait, what was BOP?
Birds of Paradise. So that goes under General
Oh,
Mana Dorks.
that goes under Manador.
Oh, I thought that was Bane of Progress.
Oh,
I like Band of Progress, but I wouldn't put it in every green deck.
let's
I'm
make it
gonna
Band of Progress.
disagree with you there, actually.
Yeah, let's make that Band of Progress for now.
All right.
We'll put Birds of Paradise in the Land of War Elves Manadorks category. Kodama's Reach, Cultivate as our like 3-mana ramp spells. Eternal Witness / Regrowth, Reclamation Sage, Beast Within, Song of the Dryads, Sylvan Library, Scavenging Ooze, and then Rishkar's Expertise, Guardian Project. All right, so I'm going to say right off the bat, I think, yes, Bane of Progress is a staple, and I don't think Rishkar's Expertise, Guardian Project are staples. I guess if we're looking at it in the context of mono green, maybe Rishkar's, but Guardian Project.
I mean, in the same vein, I think if you're playing enchantment heavy green, and there's quite a few good enchantments in green, I probably wouldn't want to play Band of Progress. Like I don't know, like blowing up my doubling season to get rid of other enchantments might not be worth it in a lot of cases.
Other than Doubling Season and Sylvan Library, I can't think of any other green enchantments that are good. I guess Greater Good, that's like 3.
All right, you got me.
I just legitimately can't think of any other green like enchantments that I'm like, wow, I really need this to stay on the board when I'm at 6 mana points. Like Exploration is a good card, which I think we should put on the list. But like by the time you have 6 mana to cast the Bane, you don't really need the Exploration probably.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of good like card draw green enchantments that I can think of, well, I can't think of them, but like I know they exist somewhere.
Well, Greater Good and Sylvan Library.
Also, a lot of the enchantresses tend to be in green, and a lot of them are enchantments. Green enchantments that when enchantments enter the battlefield, you draw cards. So in that kind of deck, you don't play Band of Progress, obviously.
Yes, but I also think that people are rarely playing a mono green enchantress deck. You really also want white in that.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not running an enchantment-heavy deck, which, I mean, yeah, that's probably the majority of most mono-green decks, then, yeah, I'd put Band of Progress in there.
I don't think Guardian Project is a staple. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think it's a powerful green card in that it has the potential to have a lot of card draw, but I don't think it goes in every deck. And for that reason, I don't think it's a staple, but I would like to hear what other people think.
I mean, I think most mono green decks are pretty creature heavy, right? I mean, none come to mind for me that like aren't creature heavy. But I mean, there's probably also better card draw, so I don't know.
If you wanna draw a card off of each creature entering, you can play Zendikar Resurgent, which also has the mana doubler effect for just a few more mana. And I know that it is more mana, but like Guardian Project I think is strongest in like a blink deck. Something where you have like a Brago that's like blinking your whole board and drawing you like 5 cards in one go, like every turn, and getting like massive value. Just drawing an additional card off of each creature. There are other creatures that do that actually. I think that
Like
those
Soul
creatures
Harvest, Beast Whisper.
right. I think you can do that effect better in green, if you're in mono green especially, by having it on a creature that's more easily tutorable than Guardian Project itself.
And this is another case for me where I probably just say like the more the merrier and get a bunch of things that draw on creature. I think those effects are pretty powerful when they're stacked together. And also Guardian Project is just inherently harder to remove, I think, because it's enchantment.
I mean, you're correct about that. I just think that, I don't know, if you're going tall, you're not going to draw that many cards off of it. And if you're going wide, it has to be with non-tokens. So like, it has to be Elf Ball, right, for it to be a really good value.
I mean, I think even just like drawing a card even off like just other big creatures, it's still not that bad. I think worst case scenario, you're probably drawing like 4 or 5 cards.
Have you played Guardian Project? Has anyone here put it in the deck?
No, I haven't had a chance to play it.
Yeah, me neither.
I have tried it in my Spell Shaper deck because that plays a lot of individual creatures, but with the addition of Kenrith in the command zone, it didn't feel as necessary because of the very powerful mana dump.
So I played it in my 5-color Blink deck, and it was really good in the Blink deck. But like that was like a very creature-oriented blinking creatures deck with like Nora the Wary and stuff. And when you get your engine online, like it's really good and it works well. But the card was very dead a lot of the time. It does nothing when you're behind any capacity. And even if you're like behind on cards, even if you have a board state, it also still does nothing for you unless you blink. Unlike cards like Rishkar's Expertise, which at least if you just have your commander in play, it'll at least draw some amount of cards and produce some advantage, so you can do it even from a behind position. But Guardian Project is like a super dead top deck.
I feel that's understandable.
I mean, yeah, that's true. I wouldn't want to top deck, Guardian Project on like turn 12. That's something I'd want to play on turn like 3 just about every time, or probably just not want to play it at all.
I might be biased because I like never played Mana Dorks. I just prefer a land ramp instead. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just wrong on this.
Well, the main reason I put it on the list was because when it came out, there were a lot of people around that were discussing Guardian Project being this really powerful card that's going to make every green deck in Commander. And so I just wanted to have that discussion with you guys over the card itself.
I mean, it's definitely good. I don't know.
I think there's a couple of staples you don't necessarily want to top deck that are still like good / staples.
That's true. All right, let's leave it on for now. This is a list we'll probably update.
I would say Rhystic Study is probably a pretty dead top deck.
In the late game, yeah, you're right. All right, let's leave it on here then. Is there anything else on the green staples list that people are not happy with?
Con and I talked a little bit about Rex Sage last night. How do you guys feel about it?
Reclamation Sage is a really powerful card in that it's a creature that destroys an artifact or enchantment. And as green's main source of tutoring and card draw is creature based, I'd say Reclamation Sage is better than Naturalize in a setting that is mostly green.
I would say, I don't know. I think it's sort of on par. If you really want artifact and nature removal, I think they have a better card. But if you care about creatures, which most green decks do, Rex Sage is really good. I think it's the same reason that, like, we have the Eternal Witness / Regrowth I put here. Because I think that if you don't care about creatures in your deck, you don't actually want to play Eternal Witness over Regrowth. Because essentially you're just paying 1 green mana for 2/1, and you would never put that in your deck. So why not just have the cheaper card to get the same effect?
Yeah, I think it depends on your deck a little bit. Because, I'd rather play Krosan Grip than Rex Sage if all I'm trying to do is remove something. That being said, in green, we talked about Beast Whisperer, Guardian Project. I think there's a pretty good chance I'm running something like that, or just something that gets value off creatures existing. And so, I don't know, unless I'm playing like mono green Galted, I'm just playing like giant men. Rex Sage is pretty good.
Personally, what I would say is that Reclamation Sage, it being a creature, is its exclusive draw, as with Eternal Witness. Because green heavy decks, especially budget versions, tend to have these cards that tend to look at the top few cards and you add either a land or a creature to hand. And that's like the main sources of kind of digging through your deck and card advantage that is accessible in green for especially budget players. And that's why I personally think those cards are better. Although, for example, in my 5-color deck, I run Krosan Grip over Reclamation Sage, even though it's a creature deck, because the deck doesn't necessarily care about creatures that much.
I think both of them are definitely staple. All right, why don't we move on to black? I think most of these are going to be pretty self-explanatory. So in black, we have Demonic Tutor, Necropotence, Vampiric Tutor, Doomblade Phyrexian Arena, Tragic Slip, Shriekmaw, Dismember, Damnation, Dark Ritual, Merciless Executioner, and its clone. Thoughts on these?
My main commentary is the fact that I do not like Doomblade effects. Because they can only hit non-black creatures, and Shriekmaw can only hit non-black, non-artifact creatures, I feel that's too limiting. And like I was saying with Generous Gift, I like my removal to be very wide range. So I prefer spells like Hero's Downfall or Murderous Rider, which has Swift End, because those can hit both just any creature and any planeswalker. And it's only 1 more mana for the effect.
I would say the same about Tragic Slip, because like Tragic Slip, you require a creature to die for it to be proper removal. And if I'm not playing a deck that can like properly sacrifice things, it's often going to be not particularly useful at killing creatures.
In my play groups, the thing about Tragic Slip is that like generally someone at the board's going to lose a creature every turn cycle. I don't think it's like that hard to get it in. It might be harder to get in on your turn depending on your deck, but I think it's still pretty easy to get in most games regardless of that.
I mean, that's pretty limiting though, right? Because you have to wait for someone else to kill a creature to make your removal spell work so that you can kill a creature. That's only ever useful if there are 2 threatening creatures at the table that you want to get rid of, and someone happens to get rid of one of the other ones.
Yeah, it's not good at dealing with immediate threats. I would agree with that. Because, I don't know, if someone swings their Galta at you and you don't have any creatures on board, you just die. So, yeah, I see why you wouldn't want Tragic Slip in there.
What if we swapped it with Hero's Downfall? We all like Hero's Downfall, I assume.
I personally like it.
Look it up.
Yeah, I think it's really versatile. I really like it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I already run Murder in most of my decks because I'm cheap. So like, I don't know, Hero's Downfall is obviously a strict upgrade.
I think actually Murder is better than Doomblade.
I
would
do
agree
as
with
well.
that. I would agree with that. The extra mana I think is worth it. Otherwise, I agree with all of these.
Yeah, I think these are all pretty good. Merciless Executioner will put all of the sort of clone variants of it. Is it
Cool.
Playcrafter?
Yeah, Playcrafter. That's the most recent one, I think.
Do we want to put what do you guys think about Imperial Seal next to Vampiric Tutor?
I
What is
don't
the
actually
source?
like the card. Yeah, because of source.
Yeah.
You're not able to quickly use it like Vampire, and it's also really, really expensive.
I'd much rather add Grim Tutor, especially because it was recently reprinted and the
Oh.
price has dropped significantly.
I like Grim Tutor, yeah.
You could add Beseech the Queen, but now that Grim Tutor is out, I think it's perfectly fine.
Wait, why is Grim Tutor better than Imperial Seal?
Well, Imperial Seal is sorcery speed. It puts it on top of your deck. So like
on top. Okay.
Yeah, you can't get the card until later anyway.
Okay,
It's just a
so-
sorcery speed vamp tutor.
Okay, I see. So then, yeah, Grim Tutor. It costs 2 extra mana, but yeah, I'd say it's worth to get it in your hand.
All right, so if we're alright with black, let's move on to colorless. So for the first part here, just fast mana. I mean, Soul Ring, Mana Crypt, Mana Vault, Mox Diamond, Mox Opal, Chrome Mox, the works. I mean, I don't think any of us need to sit here and explain why those are good magic cards and should probably be in your deck.
Even just Lotus Petal or Jeweled Amulet are okay.
All right, Lotus Petal's are great, I think, but Jeweled Amulet is like pretty meh.
It's like a Mox every other turn.
So Mox every other turn, yeah. So I don't know. It's such a it's like I feel like it's even worse than Lotus Petal as a top deck, and Lotus Petal's a pretty bad top deck.
That is correct.
Well, I think we could put Jeweled Amulet in the maybe board.
Yeah, I'm not super huge on Jewel
No,
Amulet because I wouldn't
Don't
even,
put it. Don't maybe board it.
I wouldn't even consider it a Mox every other turns because you have to pay into it. I mean, that could, potentially inhibit your curve.
All right, let's just ignore Jeweled Amulet. All right, back to our colors colors cards discussion. Arcane Signet is the next thing on the list. Pretty good, self-explanatory mana rock. Lightning
I put
Greaves.
most signets in that category.
I would put those signets in general, but we'll say Arcane Signet as our overall signet. And then
Yeah.
Lightning Greaves, Swiftfoot Boots, Solemn Simulacrum, and interaction outside of colors. So like if you're in mono black and you can't get rid of artifacts and enchantments, Karn Liberated, that type of card.
Oh, I see. So all the Eldrazi in every deck.
Well, no, just Ulamog, the hangry one.
Oh, all right.
Well, if you need Exile's permanent, so if you need enchantment removal, it'll actually do the trick.
Some actual recommendations include Nevril's Disc or
Oh, yeah.
Oblivion Stone. Those are some pretty good ones.
I'd agree.
I think Nev's Disc is really good as well. I think if your strategy is going like wide of tokens, I wouldn't play it. But other than that, I'd probably just about always play it.
How do we feel about Sofa Boots Lightning Greaves? I know you guys know me, and I don't play these cards in any because I don't like them. But I don't know. They're probably staples, right?
You and I don't really play decks that rely on our commanders that much, so we don't really favor Lightning Greaves or Swiftfoot Boots. But in decks that do care about one particular creature a lot, I would also include Champion's Helm. It can only give hexproof to legendary creatures, but it's 3 mana, it's 1 to equip, and it gives +2/+2 anyway. I think it's just a pretty good equipment that can protect your commander.
Yeah, I
I
agree.
like Champion's Helm.
I mean, the thing about Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoots, you don't necessarily have to protect your commander with it. It can just be any good creature, right?
You're correct. Champion's Helm. The downside is it really only protects your commander. I don't know. For that reason, maybe I wouldn't call it a staple. Also, because it is 3 mana to cast and 1 to equip, which is significantly worse than the other, especially like.
I would argue otherwise because there are a lot of people that build specifically around their commander. They build top down. And in doing so, most people really want to protect their commander. And for that reason, I feel Champion's Helm makes the cut, especially because it's 1 mana to equip. So if your commander is a higher cost, then the fact that it's 3 mana is kind of just fine because it's the same equip cost. I mean, Lightning Greaves is 0, but that's a different thing altogether.
And maybe we should go back to our definition of staple because upon retrospect, I mean, if you're playing like a spell swinger deck, then you probably don't want any of these cards, right?
Not true. If you're playing Mizzix, that deck requires the
Okay,
commander to
yeah,
be in
that's
play.
true. Yeah, that one's like you really need the commander. That's true.
I think Austin is right though that it might be potentially that enough people build with the commander in mind significantly that it would be reasonable to say a vast majority of decks just want this as a value piece to protect their commander.
In my play group, even though I don't play like this because I'm a Timmy, and we acknowledge that building around the commander is generally not the best, just because, I mean, there is so much removal in Magic. There's so much target removal that's, like, really good. It's generally not hard to get rid of commanders unless you build around keeping the commander, like, alive as well. So I don't know. I don't know if, like, most people play like that. At least in my play group, we all acknowledge it's, like, not ideal.
I mean, I'm never going to say that building a deck only works if your commander's play is like a good deck, but that doesn't change the fact that a lot of people still do that. Because we're not talking about CDH. We're not focused on any particular strategy that's sort of dominant, and it's just stuff that's kind of popular that shows up a lot. So in that case, I could see Champion's Helm being correct.
I feel Solemn Simulacrum falls under the same category of interaction outside your colors. Because it produces both ramp and card draw, it's a one of a both, but it's a completely colorless thing. So, I mean...
Yeah, I agree. If you're in green, you probably don't really need the Solemn, unless you care about the body or artifact capacity of it in some way. Ben,
maybe you're running a Glissa.
Yeah, like a Glissa or something. Ben, what do you think about the Champion's Helm? Do you think it's a win?
I think it's good, but if you're already playing Swiftfoot Boots and Lightning Greaves, I don't know how many of the effects.
I personally don't play Lightning Greaves. I tend to play Champion's Helm over it, specifically because I favor Hexproof to Shroud. Because typically I like to target my own creatures with a variety of effects, and I can't do that then.
That's generally why I prefer Swiftfoot, but if I don't care about that, which I would say is probably most of the time, then I might jam both or only put Lightning in there.
Well, how about let's put Champion's Helm in a proper, like, maybe board. I feel like we're pretty split on this one.
That's understandable.
All right, so that was that for colorless. I think we're all pretty happy with these as the colorless staples.
Yeah, I'd say so.
All right, so lands. Here's a couple of things that we got here. We have Strip Mine, Ghost Quarter, so Wasteland there as well. Command Tower, Path of Ancestry, Reliquary Tower, Scavenger Grounds, and Blast Zone. First impressions, thoughts?
Scavenger Grounds is actually really...
Easily the most powerful desert in the game.
I agree. The card is really underrated. And I didn't put it on the list when I was first thinking about it because I knew for a fact that Austin was going to put it there.
I like deserts. You can't stop me. It's just so dry.
I would say Strip Mine Wasteland over Ghost Quarter. Like, Ghost Quarter is just the budget option, but I wouldn't count it as a staple if you can get the other two.
Path of Ancestry, I don't think it goes in every deck. I did include it on this list, though, specifically because it's a land that tests for all of your colors, and when you run as many colors as I do, it's pretty good even if it enters tapped. And it scries when you cast your commander. So it's really not the worst land, but it is definitely more so for a deck with a lot of colors.
Here's my problem with Path of Ancestry is, like, yeah, it's a tapped penta land in your 5-color deck, but it's not even that much of a budget card these days, right? It's like $6. I feel like you can get, like, decent color fixing of untapped land with, like, check lands and stuff before you really need a tapped penta land. Like, I do know that scries when you play your commander if you're not in a tribal strategy, which is, like, cool and all, but, like, it enters tapped.
As it was recently reprinted, the price has lowered to about $4, but I do understand what you're saying.
I know. What about you two? Thoughts on Path of Ancestry?
I don't know. I don't like tap lands in general, so...
Yeah, why don't I give it a read out loud, just for anyone at home. Path of Ancestry, land, enters the battlefield tapped. Taps to add a mana of your color pool equal to any mana in your commander's color identity, so kind of like Command Tower. When that mana is spent to cast a creature spell that shares a creature type with your commander, scry 1.
Yeah, I mean, in any deck where mana is a concern, I would play this card. If I'm playing, I would say probably 3 or more colors, I would almost always play this card. I actually have in a few 2-color decks as well, so I don't know. I like it a lot.
I think in a 2-color deck, a tap line like this is... Oh, why? Why would you do that to yourself?
I feel when it comes to 3 or less colors, it's only really worth it if either your commanders are partners, so you cover a wide range of creature types, or you're a creature-heavy deck. Otherwise, 2 and 3 colors have really good mana fixing, and you don't necessarily need this kind of tap land.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess with the 2-color deck I played in is Azuri, so I get the scry triggered very often, and it's nice. I don't know. It's not, like, huge, but that deck also doesn't necessarily need to go super fast. If I play this on turn 1 or 2, like, I'm generally okay.
Well, I mean, if you're able to get the scry off of him repeatedly, it can generate good value. But like, if you're, I don't know, if you look through your deck and you're like, all right, my commander's a Leonin warrior, and I have no other Leonins or warriors in my deck. Like, it's just, even in a 3-color deck, I just wouldn't be bothered to play it. I feel like it's worse than the tap tri-lands that cycled.
I'd agree with that statement. I think it starts becoming actually good at the 4 and 5 color category. And I know that's not the most common for people. I know it's just me.
I don't know if we can really count this as a staple. I feel like it's too niche.
I felt the discussion was valuable, though.
I just misread it heavily. I thought it was shares of color with your commander, not creature type. I'd take everything back.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, like you have to be hitting elf warriors or whatever in yours.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Wow. Okay. I have to make some tough decisions after the podcast is over.
I, on the other hand, played in both my 5-color Spell Shaper deck and my 4-color Artifact deck. Because in my 4-color Artifact deck, it has 4 colors, and it hits
5 creature types.
Yeah, like 5 different creature types. Because the partners, Sakiri and Soulless Red, I think that's fine. Like, and I'm usually recasting my commanders a decent amount because they're pretty low to the ground. I think it's fine.
I feel like you regularly get like 2 to 6 scry triggers in a game based on that. And it's a 4-color deck, which makes it fine. Partners really do help this. And obviously in a 5-color tribal deck, like this card is great. But I think it's just too niche. How do we feel about the rest of the lands, though? Anything else here that we dislike?
I'm personally unsure on Reliquary Tower. I'm not sure if it really hits staple category or if it's just a decently good card that goes in a few decks.
Here's the thing, though, is it's a utility land, right? So, it taps for colors, which is a little annoying, especially if you're in 5 colors. But it's good when you want to have a lot of cards in hand. And I feel like every deck should be designed with gaining card advantage in mind. It makes sense that you would want no max hand size at some capacity if things are going your way to really push advantage and have more cards. But I can see that that's a lot. That can be difficult for a lot of decks, especially in like mono red, let's say.
Yeah, that's exactly my point.
Let's move Reliquary to the maybe board and just finish it off with multicolor here.
I want to have just a little mention for Scavenger Grounds. I think it's a really powerful card because it just gives graveyard hate in any color. You have to not care about your graveyard as well, but otherwise, powerful.
I would agree. Graveyard hate is very powerful, and it's a very small commitment to make to have that option.
All right, then for multicolored, we have the Devil, Wear Tear, Ruinous Ultimatum, Limdul's Vault, Dovin's Veto, Teferi Time Raveler, Anguished Unmaking, Vexing Shusher, Mortify, Terminate, Assassin's Trophy, Putrefy, Rakdos Charm, Eladamri's Call, and Hull Breach. Immediate thoughts.
Personally, I really don't like Hull Breach.
Hull Breach
removal.
is...
It's not my favorite just because even though it's modal, it's still sorcery speed and it's requires 2 colors. So yeah, it's not my favorite either.
Plus, Hull Breach is Gruul, so you're already in red or green, so you have Beta Progress / Vandal Blast to get rid of artifacts and or enchantments.
My main draw to Hull Breach is just the fact that, sure, it's sorcery speed, but it can hit both an enchantment and an artifact for only 2 mana. Just stat-wise is pretty decent.
It is opted a 2-for-1, but Vandal Blast is like a 6-week, so I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of alternatives that I would just prefer due to speed and the value.
Understandable. What do you guys think on the Ultimatum, though?
Okay, so Ruinous Ultimatum, because it's a new card, I should probably read it out. It's red, red, black, black, white, white, white. For sorcery, destroy all non-land permanents you don't control. So it's like a sorcery speed cyclonic rift that destroys instead of bouncing. I think if you're in Mardu, this card is really good.
It's just basically another Psych Rift.
Yeah, 100%. If you're in Mardu, I think it basically reads if this resolves, you win the game. Because you probably have a really good board state if you're casting this.
Well, it also lets you come back from behind, which is really nice. Even if you don't have a board state, if you're losing, this will set everyone else back.
I mean, that's 100% true, but there's also 5 million other cards in Mardu that do that. I would ideally hold on to this and then play Damnation or Wrath of God before I play this if I'm behind. But I mean, it's modal, so I mean, you can do both, which is a nice thing.
I personally would rather play Austere Command, specifically because it's a lot less mana intensive and it's modal and you get to determine exactly what you need to get rid of. And Like, the reason I play Austere Command is because I can typically play it and be mostly unaffected by the modes I choose.
But like, I mean, you've built decks with Austere Command in mind to make it truly one-sided. Austere Command is not always one-sided. That's the thing, is this is 100% one-sided, and it's one additional mana. Like, it's more color restrictive, but Austere Command's 6 mana, this is 7.
Yeah, and Austere Command doesn't always necessarily like get rid of the creatures that you need to. Even if it is a one-sided board wipe, you still aren't necessarily killing all the creatures that you need to kill.
I mean, if you choose the 3 or less and 4 or greater mode, it will hit all creatures.
Yeah, but I'm saying if like I'm running like a token deck and like the primary thing that's stopping me right now is like my enemy's like other token deck, then I don't know, Austere Commands isn't going to do a whole lot for me. If
Right.
that's like what's preventing me from swinging. Ruinous Ultimatum, it gets rid of everything, so.
The mana cost is just the main drawback to me. It's so mana intensive that it feels very difficult to play. But that also might be a manifestation of my greed when it comes to utility lands manifesting.
I mean, yeah, I would say that like Ruinous Ultimatum is so good, and also from already in 3 colors, I might play a Chromatic Lantern just to make it easier to cast. I mean, I already think Chromatic Lantern is a pretty good card, but I think in this case, I mean, it's pretty ideal if you're in 3 or more colors and you're trying to cast something crazy like Ruinous Ultimatum.
I mean, the Ultimatum's new, so maybe we'll have to take it off the list after some testing, but for now, I think it's a pretty reasonable choice. We were actually looking at the stats on EDHREC last night, and since the card was printed, it's in 20% of all decks that it could possibly be in on EDHREC. So it looks like something that you're going to see a decent amount of time. All right, anything else on the multicolor list that we dislike here or want to add?
I'm not sure if Terminate makes a list.
Really?
It only hits creatures when, for 1 more mana, you can run Bedevil. It's 1 more black, sure. That can hit artifacts, creatures, or planeswalkers. Or if you're in a different color, Putrefy, Mortify. These are all cards that can hit multiple things. And like I keep saying, I really like my removal to be quite wide in range.
I mean, Bedevil is on this list because I do think that card is very powerful. The two mana.
I think I would just play Bedevil and Terminate. I think they're both really good.
But I guess Terminate's the one that I would cut before Bedevil.
Oh, absolutely.
To fit it.
But I don't think that's necessarily like the question here.
I suppose, but I guess, I don't know, if we go back to what we're saying, like, is your deck really significantly worse if you don't play Terminate? I think your deck is significantly worse if you don't play Bedevil, especially if you're in Rakdos, just because that card is so versatile and powerful. But there's lots of ways in Rakdos to get rid of creatures. There aren't that many cards that are as versatile as Bedevil. So I can see what Austin's saying. I don't know, what do you think, Ben?
Yeah.
No, I think Bedevil's obviously great, but I think Terminate's a little narrow.
All right, let's remove Terminate from here because it is very narrow, especially compared to the other things on this list.
Yeah, all right.
I think I'm pretty happy with this list in general. We had another section potentially for pet cards. We ran a little bit longer than anticipated. I think we should have a whole separate episode about our favorite cards and maybe do that at a separate time.
I think we can include underrated cards, in our opinion, in that same list.
I think so too. I think we should have like a favorite cards, pet cards, underrated cards episode. That might be the next episode.
Yeah, sounds good. I actually moved Baleful from multicolored to pet cards because I think it is more of a pet card.
Oh yeah, I noticed it was
Yeah,
moved from the
staple.
list. Yeah.
Because I like it a lot, and I think it goes very well in a lot of Dimir decks, but it probably doesn't go in every Dimir deck.
Then that's going to conclude our episode for today. Thank you to all my co-hosts for joining on. And on the tapped out list, feel free to add anything in the comments if there's something is better and more important. I will have our social media hopefully set up everything properly. By then, there'll be a link to Twitter in the description. You can also tweet at us if there's anything you think should be added or removed to the list. And yeah, that'll be it.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for joining us.